Paid Network is building a decentralized business law solution to fix our current, broken, outdated, ancient justice system. Paid Network also operates the Ignition and Apollo X launchpads. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. Welcome to DeFi Now. I'm Josh Cross, and if you like ad-free crypto content, then make sure to subscribe down there with the bell notification. And as always, jump in the DeFi Now Discord for more conversations and giveaways. Lastly, this isn't a sponsored video. This is our July community video that was voted on in the DeFi Now Discord, and we're just going to pretend that it's not 3 weeks late. Every month, the community pitches projects and then votes on one for me to cover. And then the winner earns 150 USDC. So I want to thank Tremens, our Discord explorer, for pitching Paid Network to us. Now let's get into it. Although Ignition and Apollo X are what Paid Network is perhaps most known for, let's first cover their core product, which is the legal toolkit for businesses. What they aim to solve are the issues that are created by our inefficient, convoluted legal system, specifically for business agreements. And they're doing this by breaking contracts down into smaller, clear agreements that can then be easily understood, then having a network of arbitrators who can step in to resolve any disputes. One of the things that I really like about the design is that you can make an agreement with someone, and then if you want to, you can protect yourself by taking out an insurance policy on that agreement. And this is especially useful when the people are in two different countries, which makes legally enforceable contracts really difficult. The agreements can be written in a language that is easily understood rather than lawyer speak. So you list the details of what each party is offering, their responsibilities, timelines, things like that, as well as the details on how disputes will be resolved. That way the whole thing is efficient and transparent and planned out ahead of time. Traditional legal systems become more complex over time. It's far more common for new laws to be created than for old, outdated laws to be abolished. So if Paid is successful in this, they will remedy some of the core problems of legal systems that are hundreds of years old or more by allowing us to sidestep them. Now, their original roadmap didn't take into consideration how successful and labor-demanding their Ignition launchpad would be, so it will likely still be quite a while until all of this is built out, but I think it's worth keeping an eye on. Now let's look at those launchpads. Ignition has been a Tier 1 launchpad since it first launched back in March, and it's been among the most successful since then. It was fairly early to the launchpad scene. It was really only competing with Duckstarter and Polkastarter and TrustSwap. Those are the days when there was only a few launchpads and things were so simple. Now there's a fucking 100 launchpads trying to get a piece of attention and liquidity like a swarm of piranhas. You get a launchpad, you get a... Okay, never mind. Ignition's done well, but it does get criticism because it's hard to get an allocation when you're competing with whales who own tens of thousands of paid tokens. So they started the Apollo X launchpad. Paid is built on Polkadot, as you may know, and Polkadot isn't really a fan of test nets. You can't test game theory when there's no skin in the game, which is why Polkadot has Kusama, the smaller, wilder sibling. It's where projects can test out ideas that have real impact without the bigger costs and risks of deploying directly on Polkadot. Apollo X is the Kusama of Ignition, and the goals of Apollo X are to test out new and creative ways to launch and incubate projects, and to create a more level playing field so that more people can get allocations. They have experimental marketing, like the collectible NFTs for each launch, and they create a more inclusive system by breaking allocations into separate pools. To give you an example of what I mean, let's look at Star Atlas, the next to launch on Apollo X. The first pool of allocations are for people who stake at least 750 paid tokens. Second is for staking 1,500 paid, and third is for 4,500 or more paid. Each pool is segregated, so people that are staking 750 paid are not competing with people that are staking 4,500 or more. And whales can't game it by breaking their funds into multiple wallets because it's still one allocation per KYC'd individual. Then there's the Star Atlas pool, which is reserved for holders of their MetaPoster NFTs, but that's not really a thing for other projects that launch on Apollo X. Now the larger pools naturally have larger allocations, but at least this way you could participate even with less than $1,000 worth of paid. I really like the art and I like the courage to try something new with Apollo X, and although they've only had 2 launches so far, I think they're poised to do really well, especially since Star Atlas is going to launch there this month. As I said, I just put a video out on Star Atlas and I'm going to interview their CEO next week, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Anyway, Apollo X and Ignition could each have their own separate video, but for now, let's get back to Paid Network because I want to talk about that big thing that happened back in March. Now I want to talk about the paid hack for two reasons. One, it shows that any project can be susceptible to hacks. And two, I think that their response was actually pretty excellent. There are plenty of interviews with Kyle Chasse where he explains exactly what happened, so I won't go into too much detail, but essentially they hired a dev shop to handle their tokenomics, and there was a vulnerability that allowed the attacker to transfer the smart contract ownership to himself. He then burned 60 million tokens in the staking pool, minted a bunch in his wallet, and then dumped them on the market. Now here is Paid's response to it. They realized something was happening and started a war room. They pulled liquidity from Uniswap, contacted partners like Certic, Cypherblade, and Parsec to help, and then they announced it to the community about an hour after they realized what had happened. They released their post-mortem the next day and launched their V2 token 5 days after the hack. Ultimately, the two issues were compromised private keys and poor key management in general, which they've resolved with their new multi-sig contract and security practices. Now, I've never owned any Paid tokens, and I've never been in contact with the Paid team, so here are my thoughts as someone watching from the sidelines without any skin in the game. First, this could have absolutely been prevented. And second, I am impressed with how quickly they responded and they warned the community. And overall, I'm impressed with their transparency and how community focused they remained. Especially Kyle as the head of the company. They took the snapshot just before the attack and they airdropped V2 tokens to all holders. They also airdropped tokens to anyone who purchased within 4 hours after the attack. So previous holders and then anyone thinking that they were buying the dip were made whole. They then incentivized people to hold the new token by giving an extra 10% bonus tokens to everyone who didn't sell within the first 7 weeks of when the V2 tokens were dropped. It only took them 5 days to manage all of this, and then the token reached all-time highs after the hack, which tells me that the community was also impressed with their response. I'd even go as far as to say their response, in a way, it sets the bar for how projects should respond to a hack like this. Fast response, transparent, regular, specific updates to the community, airdropping new tokens so users don't have to do anything to get them, and taking clear steps to prevent this from happening again. As I said, I still don't hold Paid because right now the main use case is for their Launchpads, which I can't participate in as a US citizen, but this does give me confidence in the team, so when their Smart Agreements product is closer to being ready, I may use it and I may pick up some tokens around that time. Now speaking of the token, let's start with the planned token utilities. I already mentioned holding different amounts of Paid gets you access to public sales on Ignition and Apollo X, but it will also be the utility token for their smart agreements, as well as governance as they become more decentralized. So you'll use the token to purchase agreements and subscriptions, users can stake Paid, use it for insurance and escrow, and arbitrators will earn Paid when they're resolving conflicts. I've also seen Kyle talk about their token, and he's a big proponent of continuously adding new utilities for Paid, so I'm interested in seeing how it improves over time and what utilities they add. Now here's the token distribution. It's been about 6 months since they launched, so I believe all of the public and private round tokens are already in circulation. However, the seed round still has 3 months of receiving tokens, which they got at 1.5 cents, which means they are still wildly in profit, and we may see some small dumps when the tokens are unlocked. Now, all that being said, the price has been going back up since the July lows, and there's probably a lot less sell pressure going forward, so I will be keeping an eye on it. I never dove deep into Paid Network before making this video, and I left out a ton of interesting things in order to keep it relatively short, but I am impressed with what I've seen. I think Kyle Chasse has been an excellent CEO while also running Master Ventures, and then his connections are likely a big part of the success of Ignition and Apollo X. And I think their handling of the hack is a good indication of how they will respond when things are on fire. Most projects will have some sort of catastrophic issue at some point, and then the team's response determines whether the project will survive and whether the community will stick with them. And if it's done correctly, it can actually make it stronger than they were before. I will say that I think they need to get their core product built out as soon as possible because Ignition and Apollo X won't hold up on their own during the bear market. And so far, I've got confidence that they will execute on it. Again, I want to thank our Discord member, Tremens, for pitching Paid Network to us, and we've already got a few good projects brought up for the August community video, which is probably going to come out in September. Anyway, let me know what you think about Paid Network in the comments below, and hit like and subscribe while you're down there. Thanks so much for watching, and keep exploring.